Welcome to Threads of Truth, where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation.
Today, we're going to examine a case that has really become a touchstone for unresolved pain. It illustrates the dark complexities of family secrets, the agonizing slowness of cold case investigations.
And the incredible power of modern digital advocacy.
Exactly. We're focusing on the disappearance of Alissa Turney.
This story starts back in 2001. We have a 17-year-old girl who vanishes on what should have been, a happy day, the last day of her junior year of high school in Phoenix, Arizona.
And all that was left behind was this brief, handwritten note and just a catastrophic trail of questions that would consume her family for decades.
And the core tragedy here, right from the start, is how quickly the investigation just stalled.
It did. Alissa's disappearance was initially filed as a voluntary runaway case. But the evidence that slowly piled up over the years, especially surrounding the one person who controlled that whole narrative, her stepfather, Michael Turney, it painted a much, much more disturbing picture.
A picture that led to a decades-long fight for justice, mostly driven by her sister. A fight that, in the end, didn't provide the closure everyone was hoping for.
It's a devastating outcome.
So today, we're going to walk through the sources. We'll break down the truly astonishing evidence that emerged years later. And we really need to analyze the relentless advocacy campaign that her sister, Sarah, led.
We need to understand how she got this case into a courtroom, but also, crucially, why the legal system just couldn't deliver a final answer.
Let's start at the very beginning, the chronological core of it all. The last day Alissa was seen.
The date is May 17th, 2001, Phoenix, Arizona.
And Alissa Turney is 17 years old, just finishing her junior year at Paradise Valley High School. That last half day of school before summer.
Total anticipation. But for Alissa, this day is the last verifiable time that anyone outside of her immediate family ever saw her.
And right there, we hit the first huge point of contention. The entire timeline hinges almost exclusively on the account of one person.
Her stepfather, Michael Turney. And it's so important to remember right from the jump that he was a former police officer in the Phoenix area.
Okay, wait. Let's pause on that. A former cop, his stepdaughter vanishes, and he's the only witness. Shouldn't that have triggered more scrutiny, not less?
You'd think so.
I mean, someone familiar with police protocol knows exactly how to shape a narrative, how to maybe misdirect an initial inquiry.
That is a point that Sarah Turney, Alissa's sister, has raised again and again. His familiarity with procedure might have given his story this sort of deceptive air of credibility, even though the story itself had some holes.
So what was his story? What did he claim happened that day?
He claimed he picked Alissa up early from school that afternoon. When they got home, he alleged they got into a heated argument.
About what?
The sources say it was about her job. She worked at a local restaurant and her plans for the summer. It really hints at this, power struggle between them.
A prototypical teenage argument on the surface.
Exactly. He then claims that after this fight, he left the house to run some errands. When he got back home, Alissa was gone.
And that brings us to the single piece of evidence that defined the entire police response for years.
The note.
This one item basically closed the case before it ever really opened.
Precisely. A handwritten note was found in the home. Michael Turney presented it to the police. It was allegedly in Alissa's handwriting, and it just said she was running away and heading to California.
And for investigators at the time, dealing with teenage runaways all the time.
It's an easy box to check. The note seems to confirm the stepfather's story, so they classify it as a voluntary disappearance.
And that decision, based on a single piece of evidence provided by the sole witness, who would later become the prime suspect.
It was catastrophic. It hampered any real investigation for years.
Okay, let's unpack that runaway theory, because when you look at the details of Alissa's life, it doesn't hold water.
At all.
Not even a little. If you're 17 and you're running away to California, you take the essentials. So what did she leave behind that makes that story so unbelievable?
She left behind every single thing a person would need to start a new life. First, her cell phone. Even in 2001, that was your connection to the world.
Her lifeline. She also left her car.
Her car,
Wait.
yes. All her makeup, her jewelry, all her personal items. It suggests something really sudden, an unplanned departure, or a scenario where she couldn't gather her things.
You just don't leave your transportation and your communication behind if you're planning an escape.
You don't. And then there's the biggest piece of evidence against the runaway theory.
The money.
The money. Absolutely vital. Alissa had saved up nearly $1,800.
That's a lot for a teenager then.
It is. And that bank account remained completely untouched. Not a single dollar was withdrawn. If you're starting over in another state, you need cash immediately.
For food, for a place to stay, anything. Leaving behind almost $2,000 just fundamentally contradicts the idea of a planned escape.
It suggests a complete and immediate stop to all of her activity.
And beyond the logistics, her social life, she wasn't isolated. She had plans.
She did. She was reportedly in a serious relationship with her boyfriend. They had plans to go to a party that very night, the night she supposedly ran away.
You don't just ditch your boyfriend at a party on the last day of school to spontaneously hitchhike to another state. It doesn't track.
She was planning her senior year. She was rooted in her life in Phoenix.
So the consequence of that initial runaway label, as her sister Sarah has said so many times, it was devastating for the case.
Absolutely. The Phoenix police weren't looking for a crime scene. They were just, waiting for a teenager to come home.
That delay, that lack of initial urgency meant that any potential evidence in the home was just gone, compromised.
Allowed to disappear over time. It made the search for physical clues years later almost impossible.
So years go by. Alissa is still officially a runaway. What finally forces law enforcement to take another look.
We have to fast forward 5 years to 2006. And the catalyst is, it's just bizarre. A convicted serial killer named Thomas Heimer falsely confessed to Alissa's murder.
Falsely confessed.
Yeah, his story was investigated and it was proven to be completely untrue. But the media attention from a serial killer confession, even a false one, was enough to get her cold case file reopened.
So a sensational, completely false lead is what inadvertently gets the wheels of justice turning again.
It is. And once investigators started looking again with fresh eyes, they very quickly shifted their focus back to the one constant in the entire story.
Michael Turney.
The shift was stark. The real turning point came in 2008. Detectives actually reached out to Sarah Turney, Alissa's half-sister, and they delivered the news.
What did they say?
They told her that based on their new investigation and all the inconsistencies in his original story, her father, Michael Turney, was their primary suspect.
And that must have just recontextualized everything for her. The note, the timeline, all of it.
Everything. And once he was officially the suspect, they moved fast. They executed a search warrant on his home in December of 2008.
And this is where the story pivots from a suspicious disappearance to something way more sinister.
The discoveries they made during that search were not just concerning. They revealed a deeply disturbed and, frankly, dangerous individual.
Disturbing feels like an understatement from what I've read. This was a public safety nightmare hiding in a suburban home.
It was, and we need to be clear, the arrest that followed was for federal weapons offenses. It had nothing to do with Alissa's disappearance, at least not legally.
So let's get into the specifics.
Yeah.
What did they find in his house that led to a federal conviction?
Okay, the list is just astonishing. First, they found more than 26, to be exact, improvised explosive devices.
Pipe bombs.
Pipe bombs. Sophisticated, homemade, ready to go. On top of that, a small arsenal. 19 firearms and 2 homemade silencers.
Wow. The sheer scale of that suggests, a deep paranoia. An obsession. He was actively preparing for something big.
Widespread violence. But it wasn't just the weapons. It was the planning.
Right. The manifesto.
Yes. They uncovered a 98-page document. This was a detailed operational plan for a mass murder rampage.
And it had a specific target, didn't it?
It did. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers building, the IBEW.
What was his connection to them? Was it random or was there a grudge?
The documents showed it was rooted in a really deep personal grievance from his past employment. It wasn't random at all. The manifesto showed a man with a calculated plan for revenge.
A man living this dangerous, hidden internal life who had the means to carry out something horrific.
And that discovery completely reframed Michael Turney. He wasn't just a suspicious father anymore. In the eyes of law enforcement, he was a potential domestic terrorist.
So he's arrested immediately, but only on the weapons charges.
Correct. Possessing unregistered destructive devices, it was an undeniable federal crime. In 2010, he pleaded guilty to those charges and was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison.
Sort of the full sentence.
He did. He was released in 2017. And while that sentence took a dangerous person off the streets for a decade, It brought zero answers about Alissa.
The central mystery was completely unsolved, and he was a free man again.
And his release in 2017 is the moment this quiet, cold case just explodes into a national phenomenon.
Because that's when Sarah Turney steps up and takes matters into her own hands.
She becomes the engine. Before we get to her campaign, though, it's worth noting that even after the bombs and the manifesto, there was still this small group of people clinging to the original theory.
The runaway theory. Still,
They focused on the handwritten note and what they saw as documented tension in the house. They argued the relationship was dysfunctional, and Alissa simply fled out of teenage frustration.
But that willfully ignores all the other evidence. How do they explain the money? The car?
The only way to make it work is to argue that Alissa was so controlled, she left the note as a misdirection to make sure no one would follow her. But even that doesn't explain leaving behind her savings and her social life.
It requires you to simplify a really complex, dangerous situation down to just teenage angst.
Which the evidence overwhelmingly contradicts. And that's why the other theory, the one directly implicating Michael Turney, gained so much traction online.
The public really fixated on his pattern of behavior, didn't they?
Deeply. They focused on the contradictions in his stories, his controlling nature, and maybe most importantly, his obsessive surveillance of Alissa.
Let's talk about that surveillance. What kind of methods are we talking about here? This wasn't just a dad checking in.
No, this was multifaceted and invasive. Sources indicate audio and video recording inside the home. He was logging her activities, controlling her movements, her relationships.
It sounds like he was trying to achieve total dominance over her life.
The goal seemed to be total knowledge and control. He was recording conversations, trying to document her emotional state. It went far beyond any healthy parental oversight.
And this intense scrutiny from the public, combined with the legal system's failure to act, is what leads directly to Sarah Turney's decision.
After he gets out of prison in 2017, she realizes the system has failed. If there was going to be any justice for Alissa, she had to be the one to drive it.
She really becomes the architect of digital advocacy for her sister's case.
And she's brilliant at it. She launches the Voices for Justice podcast, meticulously detailing Alissa's story, and then she weaponizes platforms like TikTok.
Right, her TikToks went viral. She would share these short, powerful clips with evidence, putting immense pressure on the Phoenix police and the county attorney.
It was a masterclass in modern advocacy, and she wasn't just pleading for help. She was sharing specific, damning evidence that fueled the public's outrage.
Let's get into what she shared, because this is what made the public so certain of Michael's involvement.
She released things that were incredibly intimate and horrifying. First, home video footage. She shared clips of Alissa actually confronting Michael on camera, calling him a pervert.
Wow. To see that in Alyssa's own voice.
It gave the public this visceral, undeniable look at the toxic dynamic in that house. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was on film.
And that was backed up by what Alyssa's friends said, right?
Yes. Friends testified that Alissa had told them she felt suffocated by his control, that she was being sexually harassed. It established a powerful, believable motive. Michael was losing control as she neared adulthood, and he might have acted to stop her from leaving his influence.
But maybe the most chilling piece of evidence she shared was that audio recording from 2017.
After he was out of prison, that audio is a masterpiece of psychological manipulation.
What did he say?
He stated very clearly that he would only provide all the honest answers you want to hear on his deathbed.
Oh my God.
Think about that. It's not a confession, but it's this conditional promise of truth. He's positioning himself as the sole gatekeeper of closure.
That's not just withholding information. That is active emotional torture against his own family.
And the public heard that and saw it as a definitive sign of guilt. In the court of public opinion, that statement became damning proof that he knew exactly what happened to Alissa.
And this is how Alyssa's case becomes this landmark example of a cold case revived by social media.
It truly is. Sarah basically deputized thousands of online citizens to be advocates demanding accountability, and that grassroots pressure became undeniable. It forced the legal system to finally act.
Which leads us to the critical tension in this whole story. The massive gap between overwhelming public certainty and the very strict, very high bar of legal evidence required for prosecution.
That tension is the whole story. In the court of public opinion, motive and suspicion are enough. In a court of law, you need physical proof. And that's where this case ultimately hit a wall.
So because of all this public pressure, the legal system finally moves on the actual disappearance. In August 2020, almost 2 decades after Alissa vanished, a grand jury indicts Michael Turney.
And he's charged with second-degree felony murder. At that moment, it felt like a huge victory. It felt like justice was finally within reach.
Prosecutors clearly felt they had enough circumstantial evidence to convince a jury.
They did. But the outcome in July 2023 was, well, it was a shock to everyone who had followed the case.
After a 6-day trial, Michael Turney was acquitted. And it's crucial to note, the judge dismissed the case before it even went to the jury.
That preemptive dismissal is the whole key. This wasn't a jury saying not guilty. This was a judge saying the prosecution didn't even present enough evidence to be considered by a jury.
And the legal justification was based on that famous hurdle. No body, no crime.
Essentially, yes. The defense argued that without Alissa's body, without any physical evidence that a homicide had even occurred, the prosecution lacked substantial evidence to support a conviction.
So even with the weapons, the manifesto, the surveillance, the chilling audio, it wasn't enough.
It wasn't. We have to be really clear about the legal concept here. It's called corpus delicti, the body of the crime.
Meaning you have to prove a crime actually happened before you can prove who did it.
Exactly. The circumstantial evidence proved Michael had motive, opportunity, and a doubly disturbed capacity for violence. But the law requires the state to prove, independently, that a death occurred by criminal means.
And they couldn't.
The defense successfully argued that while the evidence suggested Michael was a monster, it didn't definitively prove that a homicide had occurred or that he was the one who caused it. The judge basically ruled the case was too speculative to even go to a jury.
The evidence of who might have done it was strong, but the evidence that it was done was deemed insufficient for a trial.
Precisely. The prosecution failed to establish a prima facie case.
So what does this acquittal mean for the case now? Legally.
Alissa Turney is still officially a missing person. And tragically, because of the acquittal, Michael Turney can never be tried again for second-degree murder in this case.
That's double jeopardy.
That's the ironclad protection of the Fifth Amendment.
So let me get this straight. Even if Alissa's body were found tomorrow, with undeniable forensic evidence pointing directly to him,
he could not be prosecuted again for this specific crime. That is the devastating finality of the legal ruling. The case is closed from a legal standpoint.
When you connect all the dots here, the pipe bombs, the mass murder plot, the obsessive surveillance, and then the acquittal. What does that tell you about the burden of proof in our justice system?
It raises a profound question. Our system is built to prioritize protecting the innocent, and it demands near absolute certainty to take away someone's freedom. The public feels a moral certainty here based on the totality of his behavior.
But the law demanded a link.
An unshakable, verifiable link between the suspect and the act of murder itself. And when that link can't be forged with physical evidence, the legal system, despite all the public pressure, defaults to protecting the defendant.
And where does that leave Sarah Turney after fighting for so long?
It leaves her without official justice, which is heartbreaking. But her work hasn't stopped. Her podcast is still active. She's still fighting for awareness. She's shown that even if the legal battle is over, the fight for the truth continues.
It really makes you wonder, given the scope of his manifesto and that weapons cache, was the 10-year prison sentence he served for those crimes the only real justice the system was ever capable of delivering?
That is the ultimate lingering thought, isn't it? The only concrete accountability he ever faced was for a separate planned atrocity, not for the disappearance of his stepdaughter. It forces you to confront that sometimes justice is partial, incomplete, and dictated by technicalities, not by the compelling truth.
The Alissa Turney case remains a tragedy defined by devastating uncertainty, proving that sometimes even relentless advocacy and overwhelming public certainty are no match for the strict letter of the law and the absence of physical evidence. We recognize the dedication of Sarah Turney and the powerful, though painful knowledge we gain from walking through the sources of this incredibly complex story.
Thank you for exploring this intense analysis with us. It's a sobering reminder of the difficulties inherent in seeking true justice when closure remains elusive.
Join us next time as we examine another highly scrutinized cold case that has captured the nation's attention for decades.
Episode 97. Murray revisited new clues and endless theories.